I want to hear your thoughts on snobbery. Or on,
we could do a whole episode on this.
I know, and maybe we do. Let's see where this goes. But the core idea that we wanted to get to today was idea execution. We were super fired up on it last time we recorded because we hadn't quite gotten there, but we trailed off into a different conversation during pre-pro. We started rolling, and I think this is an interesting thing. Like, where snobbery to you? What is that?
Honestly, I think that can be an ingredient blocking people from executing. I think that it can be an element of a hang-up that might keep somebody who has an idea from executing. This is just a little bit of a...
You don't have to tie this in, but I like what you're doing.
But this is like a sort of a variation on what made you bring up snobbery, which was potentially, not saying that Scorsese's a snob, but that he's sort of classifying comic book movies in general as an amusement park ride versus true cinema.
Well, just to give you context on that, we saw a movie last night.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the director in comparison to Scorsese.
Yes.
And I'm not going to specify which movie we saw last night, but one of the critiques I had was when Scorsese talks about film, you get this understanding that he knows more than anybody on the face of this planet.
Yes.
But he does it in such a way where it doesn't at all feel like he's being a prick about it.
Right. You feel you're with him.
And I think he has so much passion about it. Clearly has more knowledge than any human has. He's extremely knowledgeable about it. And without turning this into a sucking off Scorsese episode, it's like he is able to communicate it in a way where the passion shines through, but there's no ego that comes from that breadth of knowledge. And some directors,
it doesn't alienate someone who doesn't know about that movie or doesn't know about the deeper meanings.
He could talk to somebody who's watched
it brings
one
them
or
in.
two films in their life, and he's bringing them in. Whereas some people have vast knowledge on film, or it doesn't have to be film. It could be like fine art. It could be photography. It could be woodworking. It could be anything. And some people, they communicate in terms of like, this makes me better than you.
Right.
And that comes off.
Yep.
And that doesn't come off with Scorsese.
No.
So when you mentioned the comic book thing, the interesting connection I've always made with Scorsese's critique of comic book movies is that it feels like it's coming from a place of love. You have a lot of film bros and, just people out there on the internet that get really fired up about, comic book movies are ruining cinema.
Right.
But they're coming from a place of like, I'm special because I know all this stuff about cinema.
Yeah.
And not all of them, but a lot of people use these in watches, cameras. They use these things to display status. They're trying to they're trying to project
the peacock
something.
Putting out its feathers to strut and lure in the female.
All right. I'm really knowledgeable about this thing. I'm better.
Yeah.
And I think Scorsese manages to do it. So that's kind of why I wanted to dive into that topic of snobbery a little bit is, it's like, that's a snobbish take.
Yeah.
But it's not snobbish because of how he portrays that. And I almost want to explore that a little bit more. And like, your own experiences with, I right before we started recording here, I was like, I try to, I have snobbish tendencies for sure. And I really try to internalize and just go inside and make sure that that's not coming from a place of projecting my ego or my, what kind of insecurities am I trying to cover up? I'm just trying to, I enjoy some things and I want to portray passion, not the other.
And when someone enjoys something that you might not enjoy, that there isn't like some kind of judgment of them because, they wear an Apple Watch instead of, an obscure Czechoslovakian watch that you found on the internet.
Right. You've got the watch collector who's wearing like a, Patek or something.
Yeah.
$100,000 watch.
Right.
And he's like, oh, you fucking Apple Watch.
Yeah.
But then think about, there's some people that are just as fired up about the Apple Watches.
Sure.
And you've got to be able to transcend that, like, I'm better than you.
Absolutely.
If you're actually going to get the most out of the experience
of
anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm interested in, like, do you have any experiences in your own life where you've kind of caught yourself in that on being a snob right now, or?
I mean, my nickname growing up for my parents was Aristomat.
I'm gonna start calling you that.
I was, 15 years old eating sushi, and wanting the finer things in life. I was,
That's what my mom would always say, that you've got expensive taste.
Yeah, and that's really where it came from. Like, I really liked, sometimes I think certainly part of me maybe liked certain things because it was expensive or it was associated with people in a higher class than my own. I don't know where that comes from, or it always felt to me like it was just kind of something I was born with, but it's hard to know what influences when you're that young might steer you in that direction. I don't know. I mean, I have some things that are nice. They're not crazy expensive or luxurious. I don't know that if I won the lottery, I would be like acquiring the Mount Rushmore of luxury items and all that kind of stuff. I'm perfectly comfortable with my Wilson set of golf clubs. I'm perfectly fine with my 2019 almost base model F-150. And I don't feel like I'm missing out on something because I don't have a Mercedes S-Class,
I think that's the biggest thing.
Do I appreciate an S-Class if I ever get to ride in it? 100%.
Yeah.
All the little tricks and the things they do, like they do a thing where like they have an acoustic treatment inside the car where if you're talking in the front seat, it like projects your voice through the speakers in the back seat, so you never have the person in the back seat who's like, "What? I can't hear you. It's really loud in here." And I'm like, "That's pretty cool."
Nice feature.
But so
I think you hit on something though, like just appreciating.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with seeking out, like, that clock is one of my favorite things. Yeah. We bought that clock.
Right.
Because the first time we recorded an episode, I was like, man, it's really inconvenient not being able to see what the time is. I feel like I'm being disrespectful when I'm doing this or when we're checking the phone and we're having a conversation. I need to be present. You want to be present.
Yeah.
And so I was like, we need a clock. That was $1 at Goodwill. And it's it works great.
It's great.
It's the finest mechanical movement. No, it's a freaking wall clock. It works beautiful. It looks great.
Right.
It fits the vibe of the room.
And I think that's
kind of the
indicative of one of the things of why we get along. We appreciate finer things and an opportunity to acquire one, even if we don't buy it brand new. We can appreciate that. But we can also appreciate simpler things. I mean, I have a Casio watch, that was trendy back when I was,
awesome.
Whatever.
We wore a Casio yesterday.
Yeah.
Like, this watch costs like $150.
Right. And I mean, like, my clothes,
$200.
I wear a pair of black Levi's and I've got some J. Crew t-shirts, it's relatively simple. So, on the flip side of my parents nicknaming me Aristomat, my brother and I would my dad, had a master's degree. He was an English teacher at high school. He studied English literature and all that. And he, I think, searched for, growing up in southern Wisconsin, worked at a marina, kind of blue collar, all that stuff, worked at a factory. He sought out, some finer things sometimes, but not with any air of snobbery. But my brother and I would just kind of be idiots toward him about stuff, like kind of on purpose to get a rise out of him. And he would just kind of mutter under his breath in a joking way, loving way. But he would call us Philistines. And we just loved it. And we would say, like, that's, like my dad, later on, we would say to my dad, would say something like, we'd be like, Dad, that's a really Philistinetic thing to say. And he goes, you can't use Philistine as an adjective, son. Like, oh, whatever, Dad, you're so stupid. It was like the kids in Rushmore, like Bill Murray's kids in Rushmore. Like, unlock it. So we would just be idiots sometimes. Anyway, the point being, I think there's definitely things that I appreciate that from an outsider who doesn't know me could construe that, whether it's an item I own or an attitude I have or a perspective I have, as snobbery. Like, my brother-in-law might think I'm a snob because I only use Apple products, but they're not something that he's as crazy about as me to go to these lengths to use it.
It had been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the sunrise.